And we are live. What is going on, guys? What is going on, Logan? How are you doing, buddy?
What's up, Devin? How are you?
Excellent, thank you. How about yourself?
Great.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Wednesday, Logan.
Oh, here we go. All right.
Yeah, all right. So
Maybe
we're
like a
we're
slight
live.
lag.
Yeah, if you actually
All right.
watch on YouTube, there's a little bit of lag, so it messes with you. So I just don't watch the YouTube video. I just look at the chat.
Okay. Because it's really weird watching the YouTube video. All right.
Yeah,
There
it's
we
like
go.
a 20 or 30-second delay, so it totally messes with
Okay.
you.
Perfect.
So I always just pause it and just have the chat. So those of you that don't know, this is Logan from ReefDudes. And Logan has been in the LED lighting game for quite a while, and you started building your own fixtures way back in the day, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, that was the first thing I did was I just assembled a do-it-yourself kit.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't afford the LEDs that were available at the time. Really, they just had these big, expensive lights. So I mean, that's how I solved the problem. I started building them myself, and I was really big in the do-it-yourself game in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Back when the major brands were just using just three main colors. So we
Yep.
started experimenting with all these different LED colors.
Nice. That's awesome. So now with building a lot of your lighting, how much do you dig into spectrum and how much do you see value in all the different colors of LEDs?
Yeah, so I tend to focus on like the core spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of your coral's growth is coming from that higher energy range and the visible range. Meaning, so we're talking like your violets, your royal blues, kind of in that range, and then there's a bunch of accessory proteins on
Mm-hmm.
top of that. So you have and accessory proteins basically help chlorophyll do their job. So, for example, paradinin, neoparadinin, they take in 480 nanometer radiation, and they actually fluoresce red
Okay,
light.
okay, wait. Neoparadinin, where is that? Explain.
So it's
Okay.
it's like a fluorescent protein, and by fluorescent I mean it takes higher energy light.
Mm-hmm.
Corals on the reef are lower down, so a lot of that light, like as you reach certain depths, the
Mm-hmm.
red light starts to get filtered out. And that's one of the first colors to go. But if you look at
Yep.
a chart that shows like chlorophyll A absorption,
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice that there is a peak at 660 nanometers. So what the accessory proteins do, and why they're called accessory proteins, is they take these like higher energy wavelengths. So for paradinin and neoparadinin, they absorb, I believe, around 465, 475 nanometers in that range. So your cool blues, and what they do is they
Mm-hmm.
take that higher energy light and they convert it into lower energy red light. And then the cells that are right next to it, the chlorophyll, can actually use that light for growth.
Okay, nice. Now, the one kind of cool thing before we're talking to with LEDs, like, you have T5 or something, it's just a big spectrum, or LEDs, you can pick just the spectrums that you want or just what you think the coral needs, which is kind of kind of cool way to look at that, and just the fact that it takes a lot less energy and heat. Now,
Exactly. I mean, you get a lot of efficiency that way.
with actually, I think that's probably the biggest reason most people originally started going to LEDs was just to deal with all the heating issues and not having to run fans and chillers on their tank for massive halides pumping energy down.
Well, that's what they got me to do the jump. I
Yep.
mean, I had metal halides. The air conditioning went out at my parents' house. I was about 13, 14 years old when I built my first LED fixture,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I had to turn the lights off. I mean, they were on for 2 hours a day. So,
It's a very short photo period you got there.
yeah.
Yep. So how much of the accessory colors do you find they're essential for coral growth, or is it more just for visual appeal, or like what do you think of all the
Well,
other colorations?
a lot of that is for color.
Mm-hmm.
So those 480 nanometer blues. So they're
Yep.
pretty useful because they'll bring out some of those reds and yellows in your corals.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, they're actually good for moonlights. So if you want some lighting in your tank at night and you turn on the 450 or 420 nanometer wavelengths, they're hitting the chlorophyll directly.
Mm-hmm.
So the coral is, you need to give your corals a chance to rest between photo periods.
Yep.
Uh, so by using 480 nanometers as a moonlight, you actually get that kind of glow out of your corals
Mm-hmm.
without actually, prompting them to create energy and
Hmm.
photosynthesize.
That's a good point. I've never considered, the effects of one blue versus another blue on it.
Yeah, so I mean
Yeah.
that's one way to think of it is when you look at light um, through a human eye, it's different from the way that corals perceive light.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you see RGB LEDs, for
Yep.
example, it's just red, green, blue. You would perceive that as kind of like a white color.
Mm-hmm.
Coral's going to see three narrow spectral bands, two of which may not be that useful.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Now, a lot of fixtures I see will have like greens and all those other colors in it. Do you think there is like is there chlorophyll properties? I know green stuff like in a plant it reflects the green. Do corals absorb
So
it, or is it more for us to see more full spectrum of colors to our eyeballs versus the coral?
yes, that's more for visual perception.
Mm-hmm.
So greens and reds, what I mostly use them for. Now the reds can be absorbed by corals, by chlorophyll A in some capacity, 660 nanometer deep red. Um, but it's not a huge absorption peak, and it's not as essential since you have those accessory proteins. You
Mm-hmm.
don't need to really add a whole lot of red.
Yep.
So generally, what I do with those two color tones is actually with the reds, they'll make the overall color of your light a bit warmer.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of going for those warmer color tones. With the greens, you can actually make your light appear a bit brighter because the
Mm-hmm.
human eye perceives green as so much brighter than a lot of other colors. So it'll actually up the brightness of your light a little bit without really changing the par value. So that's one thing that green
Good to
can be
know.
used for. And then there's actually a color called lime that I've seen some people in the do-it-yourself crowd kind of experimenting with. Lime is, I believe it's a phosphor-driven LED, and the way that the phosphor works is it focuses pretty heavily on like the green area
Mm-hmm.
uh, and the yellow area of the spectrum. So it's almost like it's kind of like one of those reflective vests. So it's like the brightest green that you can perceive. And
Yep.
really, what people use it for is to kind of adjust the Kelvin rating up or down by just changing this one color. It doesn't actually
I'm gonna try
affect
this
the
later
color.
now. Yeah. So the biggest thing, okay, so green is mainly there to make it look brighter to you, like to us. I'm gonna try this. I'm curious now.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. Ah, that's very cool. Nick was asking in the chat. He says, "I'd like to know more about the Emerson effect, which I have no idea what that is, and infrared on corals." So
The Emerson effect.
mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not entirely sure what the Emerson effect is. I'd actually have to do some
Yep.
research on that, which I will do. Let me put that in my notes. I'll write that down. Emerson effect. So I have read a bit into infrared lighting, though. Um, so with infrared, they actually pretty recently a new type of chlorophyll was discovered. I believe chlorophyll F. I think it was a few years back. I think this article was published on Reef Builders and Reefs.com.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, I'm not entirely sure if this one was present in corals or not, but it did absorb some infrared energy. The problem with infrared energy is that, especially with LEDs, now you have to keep in mind that infrared energy is mainly heat energy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're adding infrared energy, you're just basically giving off heat. Now I've seen these used with like grow lights,
Mm-hmm.
and some growers claim that it helps.
Yep.
With certain aspects of their crop, but I'm not. I haven't really seen too much of it being used in the aquarium space.
Okay. That's fair. Actually, refugium lights are the only ones I've really kind of noticed it. Okay, on that one with growing algae. So someone in the chat was asking green spectrum in relation to algae growth. So I know some people are afraid of the green and red LEDs and fixtures. Do you think there's anything in them that makes more algae grow in a tank for having those?
Well, the biggest problem is, algae and coral, they use the same light.
Yeah.
So if you have enough light, you will grow algae. It's
Mm-hmm.
really a nutrient question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start with a light that doesn't cover the majority of your tank, or you have a light that's underpowered for your system, and then you add like a full featured reef light,
Mm-hmm.
you might see an increase in algae growth because that algae didn't have available light before, and now
Mm-hmm.
suddenly it does.
Yep.
So usually that's just a nutrient problem. So you have to do more water changes and
Mm-hmm.
control your nitrates and phosphates.
So it's just still nutrients. Doesn't really matter the colors of the LEDs. That's just extra photons coming in, and if there's extra nutrients, your algae doesn't discriminate. It'll take those photons.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a good way of thinking of it. So someone else was asking about UV and kind of coral, and do they take up UV? Is it important to have it in your lights?
Yeah, so the ultraviolet, I've actually seen some interesting effects on SPS corals, actually in person. So one of our coral growers up here in Massachusetts actually runs a lot of our lights over his system. He's using our lumen bars with the ultraviolet in them. You notice some of his SPS colonies, they actually get like a slightly different tint to them.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll actually go through a genetic mutation and have kind of like a different color pattern.
Nice.
Kind of it's interesting because if you take that same coral colony out of that tank and put it into one that doesn't have the UV, that color actually remains, sometimes for quite a while.
Hmm.
So it's actually like a genetic level mutation that the coral goes through in order to become more UV resistant.
Hmm.
I've also read a pretty interesting study as well about the coral skeleton and how it can absorb some of that ultraviolet radiation. So like SPS, since they have such a thin layer over their coral skeleton,
Hmm.
they're like lower, they're shallower water corals,
Yeah.
so they're exposed to more ultraviolet light on a daily basis. So their coral skeleton actually absorbs a decent amount of that ultraviolet radiation, prevents it from being reflected back
Hmm.
onto the coral tissue.
Huh. Good to know. It's a very good explanation. I like it. Um, Gaze was asking the difference between UV and actinic. Actinic is more of a ball braiding, which I think is a bigger range for T5s. I don't know if you got a better
So I
explanation.
mean,
Yeah.
that would be like the ultraviolet versus violet,
Hmm.
right? Ultraviolet is below 400 nanometers by definition. In the aquarium space, you're never going to see anything that's below like 380, maybe 370, 360. As you start to go lower, that actually becomes a dangerous level of ultraviolet radiation. Now,
Hmm.
you will see some like UVC, UVB radiation, which would be like the lower, more powerful radiation. That would be in like a UV sterilizer.
Hmm.
But in terms of lighting that you're actually going to be having over your reef aquarium that's safe to look at,
Hmm.
I wouldn't go any lower than 380. So when we're talking UV, we're talking about 380, 385 nanometer in that kind of a range.
Hmm.
Then once you go past 400, you're looking at violet. Some of those violet LEDs, like 400 nanometers, if they're about 405, 410, they're actually going to have a spectral curve that kind of dips into the ultraviolet range.
Hmm.
But the majority of their output is going to be in the violet range.
Okay. Speaking of,
Violet,
okay, I have a
yeah.
question. So speaking of that, so I know with UV, like there's sterilizing UV, and then there's color pop UV, which is basically different higher or lower ranges in the spectrum. Is there any negative effect for us having all these crazy UV glowing lights over our tanks, or is it in the safe range? It's not a big issue.
Well, the thing with the UV LEDs that we're using is
Mm-hmm.
they're not crazy powerful. So the highest wattage that you're really going to find in an aquarium light for UV is about 3 watts, and they would be
Mm-hmm.
driven around 1 to 2 watts. Now, I wouldn't look directly at them.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly wear UV protective sunglasses when I'm working on lights, testing
Yep.
them. Since I'm on a workbench and
Mm-hmm.
they're shining right into my eyes, I want to
Yep.
make sure they're protected.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on your aquarium, I mean, most of that light is reflected back by the glass, absorbed by the rock and sand, so it doesn't really make it out as much into your actual home. So low level ultraviolet radiation, about the 385 nanometer range, isn't all that dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
certainly look directly at those bulbs though.
Nope, that's fair. Derek, let's do this. Thanks, Logan, for the amazing products. Love the pumps. Best upgrade ever. From
I
Derek Picker.
appreciate it, Derek. Thank you very much.
And thanks for the $5 super chat, Derek. Much appreciated. Oh, that's awesome. So when I was in Connecticut, I had the pleasure of stopping by your shop and it was awesome to check it out. And you had all kinds of fancy toys like spectrometers and different things, which was pretty cool to see. With the lighting, when you're designing your lights, do you like is there certain spectral ranges that you're taking, or you're taking out new lights and kind of comparing them? Like, what's a lot of the stuff you dig into in terms of spectrum when you're working on your fixtures?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do is managing the spectrum so that it's pretty heavy in the 450 nanometer range
Mm-hmm.
and 430 nanometer range, like somewhere in that violet royal blue range. Like that's the colors that I want to focus on the most. A lot of what I use those tools for that you saw, like the spectral radiometer, is to verify that what I'm getting from our suppliers is what I requested.
Mm-hmm.
So when I ask for a 430 nanometer LED, I do that for a very specific reason. I want that exact spectrum.
Yeah.
So we'll put it in front of what's called a spectral radiometer. It's basically a quartz prism inside of a black box, and there's a sensor that's plugged into your computer, and it breaks that spectrum down into individual nanometers down to 0.1 nanometers. So it's a pretty high gradient, pretty high resolution. So I could take a look and see exactly what that light's outputting.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, with the lumen bars, they have true UV bulbs in them. So I wanted to test that, and I put it in front of this device, and it showed that there was true UV radiation at 385 nanometers,
Mm-hmm.
405, and then 430.
Nice. Those one thing I noticed when I was down there a lot, those lumen bars, those things are popular for like the T5 fixtures. Everyone with the T5 has those things tacked on the side for the
Well, I
extra
mean,
color
think
pop.
about it. I mean, if you have a 6 bulb fixture and
Mm-hmm.
then you want to get into more SPS, or you upgrade to a wider tank, versus buying a whole new fixture, now you just pop LEDs on there, and
Yep.
it's like adding 2 new T5 bulbs,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have to change the bulbs ever.
And you get cool color pop.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's the big one. I always just joke and call them crack lights because I'm over there and just makes the curls like radiate. Before one scrolls off my screen, Ravi was asking, any chance on the Photons V2 controllability via phone?
So that's something that has been requested for a while. Right now it's just a controller.
Mm-hmm.
We have added a bit more of a better ramping gradient. So once you set your light, it actually breaks every hour up into much smaller pieces, so you get a much smoother ramp up, ramp down.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put in just advanced of a program as you could through like smartphone app. And once you have your initial settings in, I mean, usually it's set it and forget it.
Yeah.
I haven't reprogrammed my lights in a
Mm-hmm.
month. Once you have your settings dialed in, it's saved internally and it just keeps running. And then with our remotes as well, I mean, they'll hold a charge for 4 or 5 months, no problem. So they're just sitting there. They're not actively communicating with the light. Your light is running itself, and it's a lot more convenient. You don't have to do Wi-Fi setup.
Mm-hmm.
You would be surprised the amount of customer service involved in all the Wi-Fi products that I carry.
I believe it.
Even with the simplest things. And so it actually makes it quite a bit difficult in some cases when you start adding an app. Dealing with different people's routers, different people's phones. There's so many different models out there that having our own controller makes it a little bit easier for us to do
Mm-hmm.
our customer service, make sure that everything's working as it should.
Nice. Nope, that's awesome. And realistically, you shouldn't be changing your lights all the time. I mean, it's fun to change in like an instant coral pop mode or something, but
Well, we have that too on the remote. I mean, you have all those settings in there, so you go boom, boom, and then it's done. You don't have to open up an app, update it, wait for it to load, connect to the Wi-Fi.
yep, exactly. But I mean, if you're changing it too much, you're just asking for trouble because then your tank's not being stable. You're just messing with your curls constantly. So something to consider. FCS Reefing, love my V2 photons. Question for you: what's your most popular light out of all the ones that you produce and sell?
The Photon 48 V2.
Yeah,
That's our light that's built for 4-foot tanks. That's what most people have. I mean, you really can't get a better value for a 4-foot tank. You're looking at just under 700 shipped to your door, and it comes with the mounting legs, remote, everything you need to get set up, and only one power cord.
Excellent, excellent. That's always good. I appreciate one power cord. Sometimes when you see, like, I've people with the hybrid fixtures and their LEDs and T5s, there's like 8 cords coming off the side of the light fixture. Anyways, aside from that, so, someone was asking, what is the best setting for nighttime? I know you mentioned a little about it, but I got confused with all the nanometers. So is that like blue, royal blue? Like which LED name is kind of the nicer
Cool
one?
Blue is
Cool.
480 nanometer cool blue.
Cool blue? Okay.
So that would be on our lights, I believe, channel 5.
Okay.
So that one is, if you want to do a nighttime schedule, my recommendation is just do it for a few hours. Unless you're, frequently up in the middle of the night, you don't really have to run it throughout the whole night. So after your lights go off, just have that channel on at, probably a few percentage points, 3-4%. Run that for a few hours, usually in the morning before the lights start and at night right after they're off.
Yep. Nice. I know on mine I do about an hour and a half, 2 hour ramp up, then ramp down at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And something like that, it extends your viewing time without extending your photo period.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. How long do you run your lights in your tank? What's your photo period?
So I'm at 10 hours right now.
Yeah, including ramp up and down?
Yeah, I think I do about a 2-hour ramp up, 2-hour ramp down right now.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And I'm peaking around 45%.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start bringing that up gradually, but last time I bumped it a little bit too much, and it shocks your corals if you do too much of a change. So I like to kind of
nice.
Take everything slow in this hobby.
Nope, I agree. I have I've been playing with like cooking the corals a little bit, so I have about an hour and a half ramp up, and then I have about 3 hours of more intense, and then 5 hours of more normal lighting, and then it ramps down. So I've been slowly, my 3 hours, I'm slowly every couple of weeks, I'll add another percent or two to it and just slowly trying to get a little more power. Hopefully more colors out of the coral. I don't know. I'm experimenting, but see what happens. It's kind of fun. Do 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 do. Greg Carroll is at 13 hours. Yeah, so 10 to 13 so far is kind of the average. One thing to consider for some people, if you are having a ton of algae in your tank, usually that could be from too long of a photo period, where you could shorten and make it more intense and still be delivering the same amount of light energy to your corals. I know that's one way you can getting around it. Aaron, thanks for the $5 super chat. Here's your penny, Derek, and thanks for getting Logan on, Devin. No problem. Logan, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So what are the most common questions that you normally get about lighting? What do you find people are confused or struggle over the most?
Well, I mean, these days, when I first started out, I mean, practically everyone who called me was, asking. So I have T5s or I have metal halides. I'm looking to switch. Do LEDs work for corals? Now the question is mostly, which LED is right for my tank?
Yeah.
So I feel like LEDs have, gained a lot of credibility, especially in recent years. What I most frequently get asked would be, what should I program my lights to? I mean, that would be probably the biggest question for new owners who are looking to, figure out their settings, dial it in for their tank. And I built a lot of resources to kind of handle that. Like for example, I built an FAQ that has, a lot of the schedules and specifically for our lights. And also there's a group on Facebook actually called the Reef Breeders Experts Club.
Nice.
So if you're not a member, if you join there, actually a lot of our users actually share their programs there. And whenever we feature a tank as well, we ask the person we're featuring to share their settings. So that way, we kind of build a bit of a library of all the different settings that are out there.
Nice. That's kind of cool. It's nice to see other tanks with the same lighting setups and get a kind of idea of, what percentages, what ranges, how they're doing it. So it's a cool way to do it. Retro Reefs, how do the LED strip LEDs mount? So that would be like the lumen bars.
How you're mounting them. Right, so the lumen bars right now, I mean, the mounts that they come with, they're designed to attach to an already built fixture. We do have hanging cables actually on the way, like adjustable hangers, so that you could hang them individually. But for the ATI fixtures, I mean, we include a washer. They screw right on the front. I actually installed one yesterday? Yeah, Tuesday actually. Yeah, so yesterday. I installed one yesterday at a local fish store here, Exotic Fish and Corals in Milford, Connecticut. So I put it on their 5-foot silver ATI fixture, and it was a straight, screw in. The bars are actually length matched to the ATIs.
Nice.
So you just put the brackets right on the end. It comes with a washer, and then you use the nuts that are already on the ATI fixture just to screw it right in.
Oh, super easy then.
And then for the Photon V2s, I mean, we include T-track bolts and 6mm nuts. So you just pop the end of the case off. There's 4 Phillips head screwdrivers on there. You slide the bolts in, and then you attach the brackets to your lumen bars, put it right on, and then just screw the bolts in, and that's it.
Perfect. So either way, pretty easy add-on.
Yeah, it took me about 5 minutes.
I like it. Super quick. What did I just see? Okay. Is there a certain percentage of loss over time for LEDs?
Yes and no. So that really depends on how you run them. Right. So if you're running the LEDs super high, so now with our Photon V2s, once we went up to the V2s, the heatsink got built a lot larger. So the fans just come on when needed and they're temperature controlled. So the hottest that I'll see it get is about 50 to 55 degrees Celsius. And in Cree's data sheet, they recommend a running temperature of about 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. And that's what they're rated at, 50,000 hours. Then after that 50,000 hours, they should have about 70% of their original power. I would generally say, over a saltwater aquarium, you have a lot more moisture, especially if you're running lights in a canopy, you're going to have more heat than normal. That'll shorten the lifespan a little bit. I see some Gen 1s running that are like 6 or 7 years old, and they're still pretty close to their original output. Probably about 75%. Now if we're talking like V1s where the fans had gone out and they've been run for a prolonged period of time with no fans, you're going to see a significant loss.
Mhm.
But especially with the V2s, given now that they're all aluminum, the whole thing's a heat sink. Even if the fans do go out, we should see a pretty good lifespan out of these. Um, and generally, I mean, every 6 or 7 years, it's a pretty good time to replace
Yep.
your lights. They've usually paid for themselves in the first year or two versus
Mhm.
like metal halides, since you don't have bulb changes and the power usage is so much less.
So
And the technology keeps evolving on top of that.
yeah.
Just keep getting more efficient. You get more colors, more control.
Yep. So quick shout out, Nick. Thank you very much for the super chat. Great stream as always. Much appreciated. To your question about LEDs deteriorating over time, every year could you just up your lights a couple of percent and kind of balance it out?
Oh yeah, I mean, you
Yep.
certainly could. I would test that with a par meter first.
Yeah.
Never assume that your lights are degrading at a certain rate,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, the human eye is a terrible gauge of lighting.
Yeah.
Really, and I would say invest in a par meter. There are some pretty cheap ones out there now, like the Senai. Seems to be. I haven't really tested that one a whole lot myself, and I've always put more trust into like an Apogee, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
scientific grade one as well. But if you're on a budget, you're not part of a reef club that has access to an Apogee, it's certainly a decent option. It's way better than eyeballing it.
Mm-hmm. Very, very true. Par meters are very valuable too. Retro Reefs, looking for an option other than Reef Bright. Lumen bar is what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, so that's what we have. I mean,
Yep.
the lumen bars we have, our two most popular colors of those
Mm-hmm.
would be the Royal Ice
Yep.
and the High Octane UV. So the Royal Ice is kind of like a blue plus. It's 50/50, 450 nanometer, and cool blue. So
Mm-hmm.
you get a lot. You hit those accessory proteins. And the 480 nanometer is actually a bit closer to green light. So it doesn't have the green tint, right? It's not quite
Mm-hmm.
hitting cyan, but it's within about 40, 50 nanometers of the green range. So
Yep.
it's going to look really, really super bright. So you get a lot of that brightness with those lights. And then the high octane UV is kind of like, that purple color. Right? So you get that 430 nanometer, you get that UV radiation, and that's really good for the SPS. So usually what I recommend is just do both, one on either side of your fixture.
Yep.
If you want just one, if you have mostly
What's
LPS, go with the Royal Ice. If you have mostly SPS, go with the UV.
okay? I find most people want them for color pop. Which ones are going to make your corals pop the most in color and look more vibrant?
So that depends.
Mm-hmm.
SPS is going to respond better to the high octane UV,
Yep.
and LPS soft
Okay.
corals are going to respond better to the Royal Ice.
Okay, perfect. Good to know. Sean Sanders. Sorry if this has been answered before, but what about diffusers? Are they necessary?
Not necessarily. You're going to get pretty much the same effect by raising your lights up higher. All the diffuser is a opaque piece of plastic. I mean, I have a plastic bag on my table here that is essentially, same thing. It's a opaque piece of plastic. If you open up those expensive $45 diffusers, it's just a piece of plastic injection molding,
Mm-hmm.
a piece of plastic. So you will get a bit more light spread, but at the same time, I mean, you're losing about 30% of your light's output.
Trade-off.
Yeah, it's a pretty big trade-off. You're
Mm-hmm.
looking at a pretty significant loss of power with those.
Yep.
So that's generally why I don't recommend them. If you have lights that have tight clusters, they might help you get a little bit more spread, especially if you're not running them at 100% anyways. It's kind of the efficiency loss is a bit.
Yep.
With our lights especially, I mean, we have what we call the dispersed matrix pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So the LEDs go almost all the way to the edge of the fixture. So you have a very wide spread where you don't necessarily need a diffuser. If you want better color blending, usually just raising the lights up helps with that.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Nick was asking, do you think we need better design looking tank mounts brackets for fixtures? Nick, in general, we always need cool mounting fixtures.
Yeah, and that's something that I've been working pretty hard on, trying to get that done. I did find a supplier for the back tank mounting arms for V2s. Unfortunately, they ended up flaking on me. I had to get my deposit back on them.
No.
Because it cost me a lot of time. So I'm looking into several options for that. It's a slow process, but it is something that I'm definitely exploring.
Yep.
And a lot of the third-party mounts will work for them too. I mean, you could pretty easily modify like the AI or the Radeon mounts to work with ours. I know those mounts are kind of expensive, but our lights work with pretty much any hardware. They have a T-track right on top. So with a small piece of aluminum to kind of
exactly.
make difference. It'll fit right on there.
I'm a huge fan of extruded aluminum too. Like I just made my own light bar just to have a cool way to mount it that was different.
Yeah, exactly. And something like that, you could slide these right in.
Nice.
We even
Perfect.
have longer bolts available too.
Yeah.
If you send me an email, I'll just get you.
Perfect.
That's available for people with the like the Aquatic Life 2.5 kits too who want to install our lights. So we have all the hardware.
Beauty. I like it. Mo's Nano Reefs just got my Corebox Wi-Fi doser from ReefDudes last weekend. Love it. Thanks. Awesome, Mo.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Par meter for the win. Yes, sirree. Best investment. They're extremely handy to have. Lumbars. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up on the chat quickly. All right. Nick always likes to ask very deep questions. Do people have a better understanding of par to per now that LEDs have been around for a while? What do you think?
I think that the par versus per argument is kind of just it's kind of pointless, honestly. When people say, "Oh, well, per is more important than par," it's like, well, when you're designing an LED fixture, you're already designing out most of the middle of the spectrum, so par and per is going to be pretty much the same. You're basically just ignoring your greens and your greens, ambers, yellow, that middle of the spectrum, which is generally only a small percentage of the light's output, anyways. So if you're measuring par versus per, it doesn't usually make a huge difference in terms of what you're getting. Par is still generally a good way of seeing how much light is there, provided that you have the right spectrum. Now, if you're running an LED light that's all greens, of course, maybe your par is going to be high, but your per is going to be low. But most of the fixtures on the market today focus very heavily on the blues and violets, and measuring for per versus par doesn't really make much of a difference.
Nick said, "Feel free to get in contact regarding mounting brackets. He's got some projects in the works."
All right. Send me an email, logan@reefbreeders.com.
Perfect. There you go, Nick. I know before Nick was showing me some cool acrylic designs he was trying to work on, so get something funky going. The other type of thing, I know the whole par versus per. The one that I still want to dig into more one of these days, DLI, which is basically the intensity, so the par versus duration, which I think is the best way to look at it, because you're looking at the amount of energy within that full schedule or thing. So if you're getting 100 par for 2 hours or 200 par for 1 hour, I mean, it's different schedules, different par levels, but at the end of the day, it could be the exact same amount of photons. So eventually I'm going to dig into this one somewhere. Done a few things on it, but some big potential there. How many people call Logan about what issue? Oh, he was asking something about the doser was dripping out.
So I mean, in the first iteration, we had like larger tubing. So there was a bit of a tendency for some air bubbles to get in the tubing. And as far as dripping, I mean, you really generally shouldn't see it if the line is properly sealed. If I would say dripping, I mean, there's different kinds. It is possible to create a siphon if you have like your dosing chemicals way up here and you have the outputs down below. That's a known thing, and we explain that in our guide video with the installation. That generally would be on like a case-by-case basis. First thing I would do is check your dosing heads. If you take the either side of the line and you try and blow air into it, you shouldn't be able to move any liquid through the line. And then we include check valves as well, so that would prevent any backflow. That's mostly to prevent any kind of air getting into the line.
Okay. Perfect. I know on mine, I had one head that had a little bit of that, and I think inside of it, the tube just wasn't being fully pinched, so I just took it off and played with it and put it back on.
Yeah, exactly. You just take it out, you pull out the tubing and then reinsert it, and then just kind of tamp it down with like a pencil.
Yep. Back in business. But yeah, that was with mine with that doser, just the one head and everything else was fine, and it's pretty easy fix.
Next to the dosing head now too.
Yeah, so actually I might have just swapped it, but I did bugger with it after.
In fact, the newest version actually has a feature as well called it will automatically prime your doser. So if you check that box, it does half a crank every 30 minutes or so. So it just goes, you'll hear it.
Really? Huh. Interesting.
Turns the motor on. In fact, it even detects initially when it does the initial setup, it does like a half turn of every motor, and it tells you if any of the motors are stuck. So you might need to reposition the dosing head or something like that.
Huh. That's kind of cool. That self-checks now. Alfred, do you think having a resting period during the day helps prohibition from kicking in?
Photo inhibition.
Photo inhibition. No more drinks for you guys. Yeah, so photo inhibition.
So a resting period during the middle of the day, you mean like no light in the middle of the day?
Yeah, I've never done that. I've seen people have lights for like 4 hours, then go in a dark period, then lights on again later. Um, yeah, I've never seen a point in it, but I don't know. Have you?
I don't see shutting off the lights in the middle of the day. I mean, I've
Yep.
never talked to a coral grower who does that. And I've seen some experiments a few years back. I remember people were doing like 8 hours on, 4 hours off, or something like that. But I mean, most of the coral growers that I talk to, it's 12 hours,
Yep.
100% power, 400 to 500 par all day.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, which I mean, Dana Riddle did a study on this. I think it was about 2013 on shallow water corals. So he actually tested a wild caught Paslepora,
Mm-hmm.
and he measured them with a pretty sophisticated meter that was actually able to detect how much photosynthetic activity was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually found that at about 225 par was right about the most efficient point before the corals started finding other means to get rid of that energy.
Mm-hmm.
So they do what's called the DDDT cycle. So they'll actually do they'll take I believe it's dinazanthin, and they'll transform it into a derivative of that chemical. I don't know if these are
Yep.
long chemical names. I could pull up my notes, but and then at 225 par, beyond that point, the light actually starts giving off heat energy on top of using that cycle, and that cycle is also exhaustible. So that's one way that certain corals will deal with excess blue light. So I want to note too that's only with blue light. Other spectrums don't activate this kind of a cycle there, but it's a protective mechanism for shallow water corals who are exposed to too much light to deal with that extra light, because the chlorophyll cells can't necessarily pick it all up and use it.
Good to know. Dana has some really interesting ones actually on the shallow one where it was showing like the intensity, and at a certain point it kind of shut down and started
That's exactly
the maximum saturation.
That's exactly what I'm referencing. Yeah.
Greg was asking tips on using a par meter. How often is sensible adjustments with readings, and are you more inclined to adjust power, color, height off the water, all of above? Thanks, Logan. Demos.
So, Greg. He's actually very close
Greg?
to our shop.
Is he? Nice.
Miles down the street. Yeah, Greg Demos.
Awesome.
And I actually tested par in his tank before. So with these, generally with par readings, you want to aim for that 225 par point, but corals can go a bit higher than that. As I said before, a lot of our SPS growers are doing like 400 or 500 pars. If you have like an SPS dominant system, and Greg's system is about, his main system I think it's about 30 inches deep top and bottom. So when we were measuring par, we were shooting for about like 400 or 500 way up, because he had this rockwork that kind of went up towards the top. So you'd have some colonies up there that are getting 400 or 500 par. Basically, we're targeting the bottom because there's SPS way down at the sand bed. You wanted to get about 200, 225. Yep. And then in the low range, 100 to 150. So for SPS, I would say that's the low range, about 100 to 150. If you have like soft corals, LPS, some of them thrive in like the 50 to 75 range. Like you'll see with some acans, they get puffier and they get a bit more colorful. And now you don't want to go too far to the point where they're browning, but with certain corals, it's better to have lower par. As far as frequency of checking, I would say check every time you make major schedule changes. And if you're changing the intensity of your light by like more than a couple percent, or you're creeping up over time in a couple percent a week, you want to just check in and make sure that some colonies aren't getting blasted with like 750, 650 par, because you might be doing more harm than good.
Another thing to consider too is if you change your filtration. If you start adding like a filter oil or socks or carbon, that can make your water a lot clearer, which can also give more lighting penetration.
That is a very good point, actually. So, if you just add a bunch of carbon, all of a sudden you've never been running carbon and your water's clearer, that could affect par as well. So you might want to look into that.
I know at least on my tank, I'm just running a very small amount of carbon. Then I have ozone at night, and then I have the filter roller. Like my water, like my fish are like floating in the air. So I mean, that versus if I turn that off, it's a huge difference in water clarity versus all that stuff running. So it's kind of can make a big difference, like surprising amount. D dot. Run my blues full 10 hours of the day. Red, greens, whites, UVs for the first 5 hours. Also now wrap up and ramp down. Right about 20%. Yeah, that's a good schedule.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, a lot of people use the blues on the sunrise, sunset, and that's going way back to old school T5s.
Yep.
Even with T5 metal halide fixtures, you'd start with the T5s in the morning, then kick on the metal halides. So that's kind of like a tried and true schedule.
Now so lots of people, obviously won the blues. Some like the white's brighter, that some like the blue tank, some like the white tank. In terms of growth or spectrum or colors, do you think have you seen a big difference between, the white schedule versus the blue schedule?
So, again, a lot of my coral growers are going to be running those whites because they want all the power that they can get.
Mm-hmm.
You have to keep in mind that white LEDs, unless they're RGB LEDs, which and I don't think any fixtures in the saltwater market are really using RGBs. No major brands are, anyways. Yep. Some freshwater lights are, but basically the point of that being that they're all phosphor-driven lights. Right. Phosphor-driven white LED is actually a 450 nanometer royal blue. What they do is they put a fluorescent phosphor coating on it, so you actually get a full spectrum output. But depending on the Kelvin rating that you pick, whether it's a warm white, neutral white, or cool white, you're going to get a certain amount of 450 nanometer output. So you're getting a big peak at 450 nanometers, and then kind of a trailing off peak at the rest of the spectrum. So you get those greens, ambers, and then trailing down to the reds. So that they're full spectrum lights, and they have blue in them. So there's growth spectrum there. So not running the whites, you're just losing out on some extra power.
Yep.
Now in terms of different Kelvin ratings, in the States especially, we tend to like to run them really, really blue. You'll see a lot of tanks in Europe and Asia actually go for more of like a 10K, 75K look. Freshwater is a lot more popular over there as well. They kind of have that kind of a more natural look. And you could have success either way. Generally, as long as if you're getting tons of blue and you're getting amber as well, it's going to change the Kelvin. That light is still there. It's still usable.
Yep. Still those photons. Mozana Reefs, thanks for the live stream. $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Mose Reef. Very much appreciated. I was laughing at Greg's comment. Funny that, Logan. Old school is T5. Such a youngin'. That's great. So Alfred was saying, have you seen LED fixtures that don't have white LEDs but still have a natural white look? Those things make the corals fluoresce really strong but without the blue look. I do not 100% know what you're talking about, but red, green, and blue make white, so I'm assuming they're just blending the other colors.
So in the freshwater space, I've seen that. So a few lights by ADA actually are RGB LEDs.
Yep.
So those, they give you this kind of, it's a bit of a strange look, and it's not something that I'm really used to because I don't really work with RGB LEDs all that much. But it's like a very crisp kind of a white look.
Like a cool white almost. Actually, yeah, planted lights. They do that.
Yeah.
Back in the planted days. Good point.
And those lights do use diffusers, by the way, going back on that one. When you have colors like that, you kind of tend to get this weird halo effect on the outer edge. So you see like almost like color bandings. You see red, green. It's like it looks weird and artificial. So that's where those kind of opaque filters come more into play and actually like blending those colors. But those lights are purely just red, green, blue right next to each other.
Nice. Derek, anyone running sunlight no lights? I have seen it. I have not personally run one. I actually saw one. It was just like a pulsing Xenia tank on somebody's desk right beside the window when it was sunlit, and it looked actually pretty nice.
Oh, I was thinking about those like natural sunlight tubes.
Yeah.
You put up at the. In fact, I saw that company. They realized that people were using them for aquariums, and they went to a trade show a while back. I think they were at MACNA, San Diego, and I saw a build with those. The only problem is, natural sunlight is what about 10,000K max, and
Mm-hmm.
that's during sunrise and sunset. So they had to put like a blue mesh over their light,
Yeah.
which ended up reducing the amount of light, and then they had to add like T5 supplements. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
interesting build though. They were able to cut out like 300-400 watt
Yeah.
halide.
I
So
think it. I think if I was to do it, I would have a couple of them, and I would put like a fixture inside of each one, so I could supplement it with some of the blues and UVs, and that way, on a cloudy day, well, it'd be hard to judge it based on the sun, but in the wintertime and stuff, then you could add in your own supplemental light.
oh, you know what? Actually, a few years back, I went to buy some frags off this guy up in Massachusetts, and
Mm-hmm.
he had taken a shed, right, and he removed the roof and replaced it with clear like greenhouse paneling,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole thing was basically it was like 90% sunlit in there.
Yeah.
It was clear paneling, so he built basically a greenhouse for corals.
Huh. That's kind of cool.
I think John's program up at Stores is doing something similar as well, where
Mm-hmm.
they're using sunlight for a decent amount of their light uptake.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to do. If you lived on the equator or somewhere where you had consistent sun, you're golden. If you live somewhere where your seasons change drastically, you definitely need to supplement that to an extent. But it'd be interesting to do. I don't know. It'll be like Reef Reader's Sono Tube Lumen Plus.
There's nothing more efficient than a free light, right?
than Mother Nature. It's very, very true. So Derek's saying here in Arizona, many people have them. Yeah, it's kind of a cool way to do it. I find sunlight in the bottom corner of my tank in the mornings, and there's more algae on the glass there. I get afternoon sun. At the end, like sunset, I'll get like an hour or so where it hits the tank, and I kind of like it. It's kind of cool to see the blues with the worms and all the different stuff.
Well, I mean, that's why my blinds are kind of tapered down here. Otherwise, this light
Yep.
angles right under the glass, and
Yep.
I have to clean the algae every day.
Yep, there you go. Derek was asking, can you explain how to figure out how many pucks/lights you need per inch per foot for a tank? Always try to figure that out. I have an 8-foot long tank.
That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the other dimensions, right? So
Yep.
I can't really make recommendations just based on I have a 10-foot tank. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a 10-foot tank that's 2 feet wide, it's you just do one row of lights. If it's 4 feet wide, 2 rows of lights. Generally with our lights, they'll first of all they'll cover tanks. I've seen them on tanks with 4 feet deep, top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So that really isn't a problem. And as far as width, you're generally going to want one fixture for every 24 inches. And then coverage, they'll cover about 8 inches off to either side for the SPS. And
So your 4-foot fixture, your 48 was about 56 by 24 roughly type of a spread. Or maybe a little more.
so 8 inches on either side, right? So
Yep.
48 plus 16, so 58, 64, and that kind of a range.
Okay.
And I've seen them used on 72-inch tanks.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on what you're trying to do. So if you want to do like an SPS dominant 6-foot tank,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to use 148 V2. You're going to use 232. So you
Yep.
just get so much more power that way.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with the watts per gallon rule is, first of all, that's getting thrown out of the window. So the gallons of your tank doesn't really matter so much, more about footprint. And every light now has a different coverage footprint.
Mm-hmm. How is with both depth type of thing? Like, how do you rate anything on depth, or I guess it depends on how your lights are off the water and everything else.
So like I mentioned, I mean, our lights are in use from some of our service companies are using these 4-foot deep tanks, and they're growing LPS corals in the sand bed, no problem.
Nice.
So you could go, pretty deep. I wouldn't put an SPS 4 feet down, but maybe some basic bird's nest. But really, they will work with tanks that are pretty deep.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. Beautiful. So that pretty much sums it up. Yeah, it's hard to say lights per whatever. Like, it really depends what the tank is, what the fixture is, and kind of go from there. PR Fish Girl, what is going on? I don't know. Any other common questions that you get kind of a frequent basis if someone's coming to you about swapping LEDs or changing something on getting some reef breeders on their tank?
Well, yeah. I mean, coverage was one of the most frequent questions there. Coverage, coral type. We went over spectrum schedules, lifespan. Fixture maintenance. So that's a good one.
Do tell.
The majority of the time that I have to make a repair on a light is not because the light failed. It's because the light is so covered in salt that eventually it costs something to be wonky on the light. So that's the biggest thing is every now and then check your lights. Check them every few days. Make sure there's no
Hmm.
salt creep on them. That goes for any kind of a light. Wipe them down. What I usually do is I'll take a cloth and I'll spray it down with a little bit of water, just damp it a little bit,
Hmm.
and then I'll just gently wipe the light down with fresh water because that pulls all the salt out.
Yep.
And then it again, dry it off.
So, moral of the story is don't let your lights get caked in salt creep and you'll be okay.
That's it.
Yep. That goes for pretty much everything in your tank. Wipe off that salt creep. It doesn't look pretty. Causes trouble long term. And don't let salt creep fall in your tank and land on corals. That is also bad. Just throwing that one out there. I've seen it kill some tissue on that with a big chunk of salt just lands on a colony or something. It happens, man. So if people want to check out some of your lights, want to learn more, reefbreeders.com.
Yes, sir. ReefBreeders.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel too. So if you want to check out yours truly doing some instructional videos, and I show you everything on how to program your lights,
Mm-hmm.
setting up Wi-Fi dosers, and most of the products that we carry.
No, that's excellent. Perfect. Well, I think we pretty much did everything today. Appreciate you coming on today, Logan.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Devin.
Okay, so thanks so much. Yeah, if you guys, there's a link in the description, reefbreeders.com, if you want to check it out. Any other questions? I mean, you can always hit the comments after the video if you're watching the replay, and we
Yeah,
will.
I'll be in the comments for a little while. I'll answer any questions you guys might have.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys, if you liked it, smash that thumbs up button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. Logan, thank you for hanging out, and
Thank
I
you,
will
Devin. Have a good one.
catch you guys in next week's stream.